Consensus Conference, the panel received abstracts and research papers from the invited conference speakers. During the conference, panel members had the opportunity to question the speakers and received copies of their slides. The major randomized clinical trials of mammography and breast cancer mortality were represented, and the latest data and analyses were presented to the panel and conference attendees. The consensus panel was made up of individuals from a variety of disciplines, including radiology, oncology, epidemiology, and statistics, as well as representatives from consumer groups. The panel had a preliminary meeting in December 12-13, 1996, and at that time, the 5 questions were discussed and specific assignments were made with regard to the first 4 questions. The purpose of this activity was to prepare a simple outline of the key issues for each of the questions prior to the conference in January. The conference was held January 21-23, 1997. After the completion of the conference presentations, the panel began its deliberations and writing. The completed first draft of the consensus document was finished on January 23rd and was presented that morning to the conference attendees. Comments and questions were offered by conference attendees, and the committee subsequently returned to a working session, at which time the comments from the conference participants were discussed and revisions were begun. During this period of work, work was halted in order to accommodate a press conference. At the conclusion of the press conference, the panel adjourned and is now in the process of completing the consensus statement. There are 4 key points pertaining to the activities of the panel. 1, the panel was restricted to providing answers to the 5 specific questions in its charge. The panel is currently involved in the completion of its work. 3, the panel has had no contact or interactions with any of the sponsoring bodies, namely the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute on Aging, the Office of Research on Women's Health of the NIH, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. 4, the panel's conclusions are the consensus view of members who have a broad variety of backgrounds and disciplines. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hull. What is your thinking on Dr. Klausner's comment that the panel overemphasized the risks and underemphasized the benefits?
All right, I think this is the first I had heard that comment, and I think what it is...
Was Dr. Klausner consulted by the panel?
Pardon?
Was Dr. Klausner consulted by the panel?
No.
Before the panel reached its conclusions?
No, no. As I said, we had no meetings with individuals from the NCI. In fact, we didn't even have, say, a welcoming visit that night. We wanted to stay, perfectly independent from...
Don't you think it would have been useful to have had somebody from the NCI there to give you their views? You don't have to take them, but wouldn't it at least be relevant to know what Dr. Klausner thinks about the subject?
I don't think that was I can't speak for the Office of Medical Applications and Research, but I think my understanding is it's to be a panel of non-government individuals who will simply review the research literature and the materials. Again, back to your question about...
Well, who selected the individuals, if you know?
I assume it was the Office of Medical Applications and Research of NIH. And I also understand, although I didn't meet with, a steering committee.
Well, I just raised the question because you have Dr. Klausner's very dramatic comment on being shocked. You have the comment which Dr. Daniel Kopens of Harvard Medical School said that the committee's report was, quote, fraudulent. You have that kind of a reaction. I would just wonder why Dr. Klausner wouldn't at least be consulted or talked to get some input.
Well, I cannot answer that. We were following the procedures that were provided us by the Office of Medical Applications Research. I should say his question about the balance. You see, we were, as I mentioned in my summary statement, we were directed to answer 5 specific questions. And this was probably a basis of how long the answers were. And the question about risks are not that well known. I mean, the details about false positives, false negatives, estimates of radiation risk, and so on. That is a longer answer because it has more subtopics.
What did you think of Dr. Monsi's comment that there wasn't enough time for input, comments from people who were in attendance?
We heard a lot of comments from the audience, but I know in every case there were more individuals that wanted to comment on the papers.
Dr. Klausner has stated that the National Cancer Advisory Board will meet on February 25th and 26th. And the board and the National Cancer Institute will discuss the consensus conference and make their own evaluation of the benefits and risks of screening women 40 to 49. Now we're going to have another group which is going to meet on it. Now I understand in a free society people are able to say anything they want at any time. But I just posed the question about having a consensus report which has a banner of the National Institute of Health on it. A little hard to find out exactly how it was constituted, although obviously we can do that. And the prospect of having a different conclusion, Dr. Klausner has already expressed himself, benefits understated, risks overstated, shocked. Looking to the future, isn't there a better way to organize our thinking and organize our conclusions, and if they're going to be dissents, to have them in the context of a dissent as opposed to having these different messages go out?
Well, I think you have to understand that the panel was not asked to recommend whether there should be screening as a national policy.
Didn't it pretty much come to a conclusion, or has the media misinterpreted it, that screening, mammography, is not really useful for women 40 to 49?
What we said was that there was no measurable mortality benefit until about 10 years post-entry into the trials. Also, the trials themselves have various problems. Now, there are some new ones that are beginning that are directed more at addressing this question.
No measurable mortality benefits?
Until about 10 years post-entry into the trials.
What was your thinking on the Swedish study which contradicted that conclusion?
Well, this is looking at all of the Swedish and American. In fact, in the report, the draft report, and you have to understand it's still an ongoing process, and we're trying to rewrite so there will not be confusion about the 10-year point to where you start to see a benefit in cancer mortality.
Well, looking to the future on activities, would it be preferable not to issue a draft report until the final report is ready and all these factors have been digested and a final report is made?
Well, that's a difficult question. I think that one of the benefits we had was in reading the draft to the conference participants, we were able to get feedback from them and would be able to take that into consideration. So this was a very valuable input to us.
Well, you could get feedback from them in a variety of ways without making a public disclosure of a draft report.
Yes, you could, but I'm saying this is basically how the process is carried out in the consensus conferences.
Well, okay, we very much appreciate. Welcome Dr. Blumenthal here. The President appointed her as the country's first Deputy Assistant Secretary for Women's Health.
Since currently there is no cure for breast cancer or method to prevent it from occurring, the key to saving women's lives is the early detection of the disease, when treatment is the most effective and survival rates are best. And that's where today's X-ray mammography has proven crucial. Mammography is a life-saving technology that can detect breast cancer more than 1 to 2 years before a lump can be felt. When it is detected at its earliest possible stage, 5-year survival rates are 93% and 10-year survival is 76%. Early detection also means that breast-sparing surgery, lumpectomy, can be performed. Recently, a screening benefit was added to Medicare, but less than 2/3 of women were using this life-saving benefit. So 2 years ago, in direct response, the administration launched an educational campaign to increase of mammography by Medicare-eligible older women. Well, there are many barriers that keep women from using mammography, such as cost, fear, concern about pain and radiation exposure, and inadequate information about the value of early